Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. Jesus told this parable to certain people who had convinced themselves that they were righteous and looked on everyone else with disgust. Two people went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed about himself with these words: God, I thank you that I'm not like everyone else, crooks, evildoers, adulterers, even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of everything I receive. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even lift his eyes to look toward heaven. Rather, he struck his chest and said, God, show mercy to me, a sinner. I tell you, this person went down to his home justified rather than the Pharisee. All who lift themselves up will be brought low, and those who make themselves low will be lifted up.
Hi, everybody. Today I'd like to share a parable with you. And remember, a parable is a story that Jesus used to teach us something. And today's parable comes from the Gospel of Luke in chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. Now I wonder, have you ever prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like blank? Or maybe you've not quite prayed like the Pharisee, but you've expressed those kinds of thoughts in a conversation. Maybe talking to your friend saying, wow, can you believe he did that? I'm so glad I'm not like that. We're probably all guilty of this at one time or another. And that means we can't honestly say, God, I thank you that I'm not like the Pharisee. In fact, just by doing that, we become like the Pharisee. Now, I've always been taught growing up that this parable was a way of saying, Pharisee, bad, not humble. Tax collector, good, humble. But that seems a little too simple. And maybe you've heard a grown-up say, there are two types of people in this world. But hold on. That kind of sounds a bit like the Pharisee, doesn't it? Jesus' parable challenges us, and I think you're up for the challenge. I wonder maybe if this parable is not meant to separate tax collectors and Pharisees. Rather, Jesus means to tell us to stop and bring us face to face with our relationship with God. Now, when I think about the Pharisee's prayer, I wonder, who was the Pharisee trying to convince? God? Himself? His prayer seems a lot more like a checklist or a scorecard. Have you ever done that? Thinking to yourself, well, today I didn't call anybody a bad name. The teacher didn't really have to get on me in the class today. I ate all of my vegetables at dinner tonight without being asked. Yep, I think that I was a good person today. This checklist or scorecard is a way that we convince ourselves that we are A-okay, we're good, and our life is fine because we're not like them. That's what the Pharisee is doing here. I'm not a bad person. I don't take money like this tax collector. I not only follow the law, I go over and above its requirements. I'm a good and faithful Jew. And you know what? He probably was. I have no doubt that what he was saying was true. But when we think we have everything, the right answers, the right reputation, when we think we have the right number of points on our scorecard, we are relying on us and forgetting our need for God. So it seems to me that this parable is not about the bad Pharisee and the good tax collector. In fact, the people of Jesus' day would have seen just the opposite. Pharisees were respected and educated, faithful, holy people. They tried to do what was right. And tax collectors, they were considered the worst. They worked for the Roman Empire. They took money from their own people. They were considered the bad guy. So these two folks might seem really different from each other, but maybe they're not as different as we think, because they both need God. The difference is the tax collector knows he needs God, and the Pharisee is too busy keeping score to remember that he does too. This parable is Jesus inviting us all to stop. Stop keeping score and to hold before God our whole life, poor choices included. acknowledging, like the tax collector did, that we need God. You see, the tax collector went home approved, not because he was good or better than the Pharisee. He wasn't, but because he knew he needed God. And he came to God with that instead of his scorecard. So God didn't hold anything back from the Pharisee. God simply gave him what he asked for, which was nothing. While for the tax collector, God's mercy opened up a way for him to have relationship with God. So perhaps Jesus is reminding us that we need to remember that we need God. And the beautiful thing is that our God always gives us a choice, being ever present with us when we get stuck keeping score, and hearing us when we remember to look up from our scorecards and acknowledge that we need God. Won't you pray with me?
Dear God, please help us to remember that we don't know it all and we aren't above any other person. Help us to remember to ask and listen for help from you and others. Thank you for loving us no matter what. Amen.